Pocahontas is one of the first animated movies about non-European culture from Disney. It was revolutionary for them to introduce a Native American princess on the screen. I believe there were a lot of little girls that could not wait to see Pocahontas. Personally, I liked this movie when I was little, mostly because of the songs and the animals. Today, I am going to look at it from a totally different perspective of a media student and examine how Disney represented the culture of the Native Americans in this animated movie. Pocahontas is a movie from 1995 and it was directed by Eric Goldberg and Mike Gabriel. So we have another two white Americans that directed a movie about a significant culture that was colonized by the Europeans. An American-based company created a movie about the issues that Native Americans had to face, which does not sound very good at first. Not many American natives worked behind the scenes of Pocahontas. The overall concept for the movie is not as good as it may sound. Disney decided to add this movie to its Princess franchise and turned it into another commercial production. Therefore, the history about Pocahontas became another Romeo and Juliet love story, where language becomes a barrier. And we definitely do not see the real history of Pocahontas from the Powhatan tribe of Virginia. An important fact about the movie is that it is connected to the history of the Powhatan tribe that lived in Virginia during the 16th century. Pocahontas was indeed a daughter of the chief Powhatan nation of the region of Virginia, one of the strongest at the time. Pocahontas was born around 1595 and married a tribal member, Kokoum, in her early teens. When the British invaders came into Jamestown together with well-known John Smith, there was no love story. Even though Pocahontas helped John Smith, there were no feelings involved. After a few years, she was kidnapped by the colonists. British colonists lured her aboard their ship and held captive for over a year. They dressed her in English clothes, she was learning about their religion, and she was even baptized as a Christian. Later on, she married a British colonist to provide support for the Powhatans. She then traveled with her husband and son to England to meet King James I. She died the following year before she had the chance to come back to Virginia, and she was buried in an English churchyard. Her story is very tragic. However, she left a memorable impression on colonial America as a strong and brave woman. I believe it is important to learn this history in order to fully understand the cultural background of the Disney production. History is a big part of the culture of Native Americans. Pocahontas was in fact a princess. Disney showed her story without the strong brutality towards her from the British colonists. She is portrayed as a free spirit that lives in union with nature. Disney showed how kind and gentle she was towards the colonists, which fits perfectly into the good Indian stereotype. The good Indian stereotype evolved during colonialism, and it portrayed the natives that helped Europeans who came to their land. It is often represented in the media through brave warriors or romantic princesses. However, these representations of natives exist in movies solely to mask their struggles with reality, where they were losing their lives, lands, and rights. Pocahontas in real life was forced to change her appearance, her faith, and even her name to Rebecca, but Disney still showed Pocahontas as a character driven by the altruistic need for peace, displayed her need for finding love, showed her respect towards the invaders, and sexualized her in every possible aspect at the same time. Her story, from the historical point of view, was brutal, and Disney changed it into a children's entertainment. Native American woman Kenzie Allen, a descendant of the Oneida tribe of Indians of Wisconsin, shared with The Atlantic. I've struggled with Disney's Pocahontas as a source of pain and stereotype. Both Pocahontas and Sacagawea are often held up as heroines in the Western perspective, their stories reduced to kinder details rather than serving the interest of the dominant culture. Culture is very important for the indigenous people, and history is a big part of their culture. Degrading the history of Pocahontas is a lack of respect towards their history and therefore their culture. Disney production only kept the nice parts of the history in the movie and did not show the real struggles. Stereotype of the good Indian is shown by the example of Pocahontas. The love story between Pocahontas and John Smith starts with him trying to kill her, and then they begin bonding and communicating in his language, which is possible because of the good spirits that came with the wind. The climax of the movie, where she says, "If you want to kill him, you have to kill me first," is a strong moment in the movie. It shows how her love is the reason for the Powhatans to drop the fight, not her need for peace. She is more devastated by the possibility of losing John Smith than by the death of Kocoum, which can be perceived as another good Indian act in the production because she cares more about the invader. Another interesting part of the movie is how it states that white men came to kill the Powhatans, which was described as revolutionary by Russell Means, an activist for the rights of Native Americans. However, the movie has implied that both sides of the conflict were at fault. The usage of word savages by the Powhatans towards the colonialists in the animation was to show the negative approach of the Native Americans. It was to underline their brutality, which is another stereotype about the indigenous people used in pop culture. As both nations say throughout the movie, they are not like us, which means they are evil. The message was encoded in such a way by the Disney productions to decode it for the benefit of the European invaders. We can see that when John Smith explains to Pocahontas how many good things they can offer them, building better houses and developing their civilization. However, we cannot forget that it was love that was in the foreground, the love story between a Native American woman and a British settler, John Smith. It brings up yet another issue with the cultural representation in this movie, the way in which they portrayed Pocahontas. Glenn Keane, an American animator for Pocahontas' character, said in an interview, "We're doing a mature love story here, and we've got to draw her as such. She has to be sexy," says Keane, who likens her to a tribal Eve. This is a Disney version. This is not a documentary. An American supermodel, Christy Turlington, was one of the inspirations for the character of Pocahontas. Animators wanted Pocahontas to be sexy, and Keane says it very openly. Why is it relevant? Mainly because the male gaze of the Hollywood cinema struck again, but this time it was connected with the common stereotypes about Native Americans. Indigenous women tend to be sexualized in movies, and this is a huge stereotype that Disney did not overcome. For example, when we compare Pocahontas' appearance to Nakoma, her friend, throughout the movie, we can notice some big differences. Nakoma has tight hair, Pocahontas has loose hair, which makes her more attractive. Nakoma has smaller lips and Pocahontas has bigger lips. Even though they are both wearing a short dress, Nakoma's top covers her chest and Pocahontas shows much more body. She has a tiny waist and a long legs, which refers to the Western inspirations of Disney animators. One of the first scenes in the movie shows the two girls playing in the water together, which could be fun if it wasn't another form of sexualizing Native women. During this one shot, we can see them from under the water and their legs and floating skirts are in the center of attention. Devon Abbott Maihisua, in her book Indigenous American Women, Decolonization Empowerment Activism, describes the sexual abuse Native women have to endure because of their representation in media. When I tried to Google Pocahontas and her friend Nakoma, the graphics of them kissing showed up in just the second row of Google graphics. This is a form of harmful cultural appropriation because the women from the Native Americans' culture are taken and changed into a sexual commodification for fans of the male gaze, which results in adding into the gender stereotypes of Native women rather than challenging them. The sexualization in terms of cultural representation of the character of Pocahontas is important as it diminishes her true appearance features. An interesting thing is how they present the male characters in comparison. The chief of the tribe is shown as the strongest and the biggest one. John Smith, on the other hand, is portrayed as the true hero for his European crew and for the Powhatan tribe, when he tries to save the chief from the governor's gun in one of the last scenes. We do not see them sexualized as much, therefore their personality traits do not get lost as much as Pocahontas's. As Stuart Hall wrote in the Essential Essays, before this message can have an effect, or satisfy a need, or be put to a use, it must first be perceived as a meaningful discourse and meaningfully decoded. It is this set of decoded meanings which have an effect influence, entertain, instruct, or persuade, with very complex perceptual, cognitive, emotional, ideological, or behavioral consequences. Stuart Hall states that a message should be meaningfully decoded to have an effect on people, not only to entertain, but also to influence. The way in which the movie diminishes the main characteristics of the Native Americans and sticks to the stereotypes while representing their culture lacks this meaningfulness. This whole Disney production definitely lacks respect, and this does not change in the Pocahontas 2 Journey to a New World from 1998, where Pocahontas' whole look is being changed so that she is approved by the King of England. They put makeup on her, English dresses and shoes. When European colonists came to her land, they did not adapt to the environment. To conclude, the Walt Disney Company did not do well with this production. We cannot say that the movie is terrible, as it has some good aspects, like being the first animated movie about Native American women, or being the first movie to openly state that European invaders wanted to kill the Native Americans. However, it is not the best Disney production when it comes to representing culture, even though we can see much more cultural aspects than in Beauty and the Beast. This podcast and music were written and directed by Martyna Krupińska, 2022.